All right. Hi there, everyone. Thanks for your patience. My name is Natalie Vlatko. I am one of the co-chairs for the Special Interest Group for Documentation. On today, this day, Tuesday, the 2nd of April, 2024. Hello to all of those YouTubers out there watching us in the future. This is a SIG Docs meeting that occurs bi-weekly, and because we are part of the Kubernetes project, we do abide by the Kubernetes Code of Conduct, which generally means we'd like you to be kind and respectful to one another. And if you do have any issues that come up either in meetings or in Slack, PRs, issues, and so on, please reach out to the Code of Conduct Committee, whose contact details I'm going to show shortly, but conduct@kubernetes.io for folks who need that information now. Again, big thanks to everyone joining. What we usually do here in SIG Docs is we want to give a bit of room for any new contributors who are around who'd like to unmute and say hello, or maybe they'd like to share something in the chat that they're new here. Please feel free to unmute and say hi now.
Hi Natalie, hi everyone. My name is Arvind. I'm a new contributor here. I just attended my SIG Docs new contributor meet and greet call today, and I got to know this call was happening as well, so I thought of joining here. I'm a full stack developer and a student currently from India. I did attend a few cloud native meetups, and I really found it interesting. So here I am trying to just help out and contribute in any way that I can. Thank you.
That's awesome. Welcome, Arvind. Thank you so much for saying hi and taking part. We are very excited to have new contributors here. So thank you for joining. Anyone else on the call want to unmute or pop in the chat and say hi?
Hi, I'm Daljit from the Netherlands. I was at the KubeCon Europe in France, and there was a session by Divya about documentation, and I thought it was really nice to join and contribute to the open source world. Actually, my background is development, mainly Java. So I know Kubernetes, I use it at work, but I never had experience with the special interest groups and contribution. So this is my first step into contributing to open source.
Daljit, thank you so much. Welcome. That's so great that you are here from our talk that Divya and Ray gave, who are two of our co-chairs for the SIG. That's awesome. Great to have you. Thanks for joining. And great that you attended. We had a really great attendance at our Maintainer track talk for this KubeCon Cloud Native Con. So it's awesome to see you here. Welcome.
Thanks.
Anyone else? Alrighty, going once. All right, I think we're going to call it there for today for the new contributors. But if anyone else wants to jump in and say hi throughout the meeting, definitely feel free to do so. We're happy to hear from you. We're going to go now through a couple of the general updates and reminders that we do for the SIG Docs meetings that we have bi-weekly. This happens every week, so folks who are used to this get prepared. For those who are new to the SIG, we have a role in the SIG called a PR Wrangler. It means that we roster someone who is an approver of the SIG, that has approving capabilities in GitHub as part of the Kubernetes org, to help us push our contributions through that are coming through via PRs. And so we have a weekly rotation that our approvers are on. And this week's Wrangler is Divya, actually, who Daljit saw speak at KubeCon. And Divya is being shadowed by Satyam, and we also have shadows for this specific role. So if anyone is interested in shadowing, you can double check in the agenda here. We've got a link to the PR Wrangler shifts and see if there's anything that you're interested there on the shadowing front. But this week's Wrangler is Divya. Next week's PR Wrangler would be Nate Waddington with Rudrak shadowing. And then the following Wrangler is Celeste with Network Charles shadowing. So for all the approvers on the call, please check your PR Wrangler shifts. Ray is doing really great at updating in the SIG Docs channel for the Wranglers that are on. But yeah, knowing your shifts in advance is also really good. We usually only get about 5 a year. Another thing that we have as an update and a reminder is that we have a new role for 2024. It's called the Issue Wrangler. Much like a PR Wrangler, we get a lot of issues, and we need to make sure that as a SIG, we're getting through them so that we can mark things that are good for new contributors and issues that need help with, but also so that we can get through a lot of issues or potentially bugs even that are coming through from users in the community so that we can start to address them as a SIG. And this week's issue wrangler is Celeste, and next week's is me. So for folks who have questions about issues, feel free to tag either of us, and then we'll be able to help you out with them. And Rolfie, I think I see your hand up.
I was just wondering if I could shadow you as an issue wrangler.
Absolutely, yes. If you jump into the issue wrangler shifts, I believe there is a spot to have a shadow. If there isn't there, just ping me on Slack to remind me and I can create that and do that for you as well. No worries.
Thank you.
Great. If there's any other questions on this, feel free to pop them in the chat just to make sure that we are addressing all the stuff in our agenda. I am going to move on. But thanks everyone on the approving and issue wrangling list for knowing your shifts. Finally, just another reminder about the code of conduct. We take that really seriously here as part of the Kubernetes project. So if you notice anything, feel free to use conduct@kubernetes.io to send in your issue, and your identity will be anonymous in terms of anything that you're talking about. It'll only be the code of conduct committee that is aware. Okay. I've done a lot of talking. What I'd like to do now is head to the agenda. And what we are doing at first with our agenda here at SIG Docs is we look at the current release. We've got a few release folks here on the call who are joining us each 2 weeks, which is great. And our first update is on docs. If I can hand over to our docs rep.
Yeah, so we had the doc freeze go into effect a few weeks ago, or maybe I think it was last week actually. And we had one exception, and so there were a few rounds of follow-up that we had on that document while the contributor is out. I personally created the PRs and got them merged with feedback from SIG docs, but there were a few questions for the contributor, and it looks like they're still out until next week. So I was just curious if we wanted to, if you wanted anything from us to continue following up, maybe ask the contributor to make a PR against the main branch so we could continue talking about their document.
Yeah, that personally sounds fine to me, Drew. I believe Tim has already done the review on this, and that the PR merged. So additional ones can go against main, so that specific contributor who's back from vacation or wherever they might be is able to answer to them. That definitely sounds fine to me.
Okay.
It's past the general review of some of our approvers and is also fine for the current release of docs. So for me, we shouldn't be a blocker.
Okay. I see there was a comment about the feature gate, so I'm going to create a PR on that to get that in before our release. And then the other thing we're doing is preparing for the release. So I see in the handbook there's we want to get the API reference, the kubectl and component docs generated. I just wanted to double check that SIG docs has everything they need.
I believe so. Ray is usually our go-to for this, and unless he's mentioned anything kind of in the lead up to this, everything should be fine for now. I don't think Tim, I'm not sure if he's discussed anything with you. I think everything's okay for now.
So far as I know.
Yep. Okay. Drew, I think you've actually asked that question specifically in the SIG Docs maintainers channel as well. Is that correct?
Yeah.
Yeah. Feel free to. It is very likely that Ray will be the SIG Docs lead that is teaming up with you for this release in terms of the work that needs to be done on the docs end. Feel free to tag Ray and just double check that everything's okay. But we can also follow up again once Ray is back from the events and things that they're currently at, because they're not able to be at the meeting today.
Awesome. Thank you.
You're welcome. Any other updates or questions for docs? The release docs, I should say. All right, thanks so much, Drew. We now have the release comms status update, and it's actually my turn to give it because I'm also a release comms shadow this cycle. And so for folks who can see, our status for the release comms is green. All the release blog has now been moved from a draft status to an open PR. Big thanks to Kristen for pushing and pushing a lot of the different changes and suggestions that were made by us as a release comms team, but also as the blog reviewers already so far. And we've also added all the different missing kept descriptions that were missing from yesterday. Now that's all been updated. And finally, the last update on the comm side is that the major themes for 130 have been shared with the CNCF PR team. I've listed them below with links to their KEPs for folks who are interested. But these themes were shared with the PR team for our usual release comms duties in terms of what we do for PR after the release happens. And that's all for the comms update. I see a hand from Tim.
How's the post-release blog series going?
It's going great, in the sense that all of them are actively being reviewed. I do believe, if Kristen is on the call, I do believe this week we'll be following up with those authors again to make sure that we're getting those ready for publication.
Yeah, I just put a note in our group chat about making sure people are following up. And if we need any help, that we can for sure reach out for that, as we did with the release blog.
Great. Thanks, Kristen. Thanks, Tim. Any other questions for comms, release comms?
I don't have a question for the comms, but I have a question for SIG Docs, and it's related to emoji support on the website. Is there emoji support on the website, or yes or no? I believe it's no. Okay. Okay, so that's something in the yes, Tim. I see your hand.
So to be clear, you can use Unicode. You can't put colon, ta-da, colon, and have it converted into a Unicode.
Cool. Okay, just wanted to double check. Thanks.
Cool. Yeah, I can understand that that might be sometimes confusing because GitHub supports that, but not our website. So yeah. Okay. Any other questions around release comms? All right, thanks everyone. Abby, I'm going to hand it back over to you because we're up to the issues and PR section of our agenda, and I can see you've got an issue around test localization tools.
Yes, hello. So this is a new issue about a topic we've been talking about a lot, and this is for testing translation management tools. So we have a process set up within Kubernetes for localizing our content just out of GitHub, but there are tools, these management tools that make it easier in theory to do translations. We don't currently use them, but there's been a lot of interest from particular localization teams about integrating them into our processes. So this is an issue that sort of outlines what we'd like to see from testing to see if it's something we'd like to adopt within the localization teams. So set this up. Tim, thank you again for reviewing and giving a lot of feedback on how to sort of structure this issue and what we need to see out of testing. So the ask now is to kind of review this and see if it makes sense, and then to try to find volunteers to help do the actual work for testing. I had just created this issue this morning, so it's really, a fresh issue, so there hasn't been a lot of eyes on it, but open to feedback, and hopefully we can get a lot of some good volunteers willing to help from the localization teams, and particularly from one language, because I think that would help us be able to test the whole workflow of people doing the translation and then reviewers, and then, in theory to, what would be a publication workflow. So if people are interested, please comment on the issue or reach out in Slack, and I'd be happy to chat more Thanks.
Thanks so much, Abby. Does anyone have any questions? I have a question before when we move on. Great work on the issue, and also a big thanks to Tim as well. I noticed in the issue too, there's a lot of really great work around resources and how the roles should work, and then generally also some non-goals. But one thing I wanted to request is some kind of time boxing for this. I think leaving this open indefinitely is a bad idea. But at the same time, figuring out what a good time frame would be, because it's also a decent investment in terms of getting people on board and so on. And obviously that time frame should be once everyone is kind of on board and you have some of those roles filled. So I just wanted to kind of throw that out there as having a time box thing is really good, and putting it on the issue as this will be time box TBD on what that would be, but already kind of putting it up there so that folks can have that expectation.
Yeah, for sure. That's definitely don't want to leave this indefinitely open forever. I think we just estimated that once kind of we get volunteers, we'd be looking at about a 30-day month period to actually do the testing. But I also want to make sure we're getting volunteers and not leaving it to do testing in 6 months. So yes, I'm going to try to focus and reach out more to the localization teams to see if there's more interest in getting volunteers, and then hopefully quickly formalize and get started. But that's a really great point. Don't want to have people volunteer and then a year later ask them to show up for meetings. So thank you.
Yeah, no problem. No worries at all. Notary. Indefinite. I'm in docs. I can't spell. Use another word. Okay. Rolfie, you've got a hand up.
Oh, I just wanted to say I had drafted a proposal including a timeline that was not based. I had just proposed it in the discussion, but not included the information that's in this issue. So please do disregard that, and I can make revisions. I just wanted to see if there was any interest for getting into project planning at this stage.
Abby?
Do you mean like going like actually creating more subtasks for folks?
Yeah. I had basically listed some tasks, and then I tossed out some Kanban tasks, and there was a week by week schedule attached to that by default, but there was no coordination between those proposed dates and what people had discussed here, and certainly not with what Natalie was just describing. So I guess what I'm saying is ignore the dates on the project plan, and yeah, that's it. Thank you.
Okay, yeah, I don't think I had a chance to take a look at that, but we can certainly kind of take from either place if you're interested in continuing to help with the testing and planning, etc.
Yeah, absolutely. I'd love to find an opportunity to help with the project management.
Great. I'll write here in the notes that the two of you will connect to try and figure out some work on that. That's great. Awesome. Thanks, folks.
I'm going to ask.
Yes, Tim.
Would anyone like to be involved in a bit of this localization tools thing? Like, you might the two things you might say is like, yes, I'd like to be involved. And the other one is maybe I have questions.
Does anyone have questions? Just that's the ask right now.
Sriram, I see you unmuting. Maybe you have a question. Go and ask.
Yeah, I was going to say that I'm interested, and like I'll reach out to you on Slack after I go through the issue.
Yep, there's a localizations channel which you've probably seen. It's SIG docs localizations. So best place to follow up is there, I think. I can't think of a better channel. Yeah, and asking questions there is fine, but like if you want to ask a question right now, that's also fine.
Yeah, right now I don't have enough context.
Cool. Or anyone else.
Great. Thanks, folks. This is going to be something that could be super beneficial for a lot of different localizations, but also, as Abby already stated on the issue itself, it's going to be something that each localization has a choice to possibly adopt if it's something that ends up being successful. It's not going to be a blanket rule that we put on every localization, just another tool to possibly make their work easier, frictionless, etc. One thing that we are currently chatting about, and this is something that is ongoing, is we've got the CNCF involved in asking some questions around the AZCLA, either in terms of involving that as part of the tool or not, and just generally some legal guidance around that and how tooling can integrate or not with that kind of process and bot that it already does with Kubernetes. And that's still ongoing, and the meeting hasn't yet happened yet in terms of where that needs to be discussed on the CNCF LF level. So just want to put that on the recording that is still a thread that is being followed. It's just the meeting with the LF legal folks has yet to occur. So as an update there. Just checking the chat here. Oh yes, thanks so much, Abby, for adding in there to reach out in SIG docs localizations. Appreciate it. Okay. Any other points or questions on this topic before we move on? All right, I'm going to say no. Thanks everyone for the chatter now and for taking part and hopefully getting involved. We're looking forward to seeing where this can take our localization teams as well. All right, Nate, I would love to hand it over to you as you've got the next topic here, coming back to search now that we're all back from KubeCon.
Yay! Hello, everyone. Just a quick sort of update on my plans. I think it was Tim asked what the next steps for the issues are, and in my opinion, the next steps are for me to research some of the proposal or some of the alternatives that have already been suggested, as well as try and figure out what a good proposal for that would be. I don't want to sort of try and implement anything without having obviously the community feedback, but there's a lot of different ways to sort of approach this. So I'm hoping, just an availability note, I'm actually going to be off for part of the second half of April. So I'm hoping that by the next sort of meeting, by the time this meeting comes around again, I'll have something that we can discuss, and then I may wander off for the actual discussion and then come back afterwards and see what the next steps are. But I think that there have been some interesting sort of, I even saw Algolia put a demo in there. So I want to do some research. A question I might have, is there any non-starters in terms of search that you're aware of? I know I happen to like Lunar. I've heard some arguments against Lunar. So I'm if there is any sort of tool that you're like, no, Nate, this will simply not get put in, I'd rather not spend the time on researching it. So are there anything, are there any things like that I should avoid stepping in, or?
My first thing would be to actually make sure that you are able to involve the Chinese localization team and ask them that same question, as this is likely going to actually impact them a lot.
Right.
They're definitely very, very important to include and work with for sure.
Yeah. All right, noted, and I will do that, because that's yeah, absolutely, because I mean, part of search is supporting that team. So yeah, I completely
right.
agree. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think then on that same thread, and I say this in light of a couple of new localizations that we have spinning up. I know Bangla and Arabic are currently in the process, but are there any other teams or let's say regions that we need to also be aware of that possibly have similar restrictions that for our folks from the Chinese localization might have with search? That's not something that I personally have a lot of information on, but I'm not sure we've done enough research to make sure that we're catering to everyone or yet. Just want to kind of put that out there as a suggestion.
Yeah. Tim?
There's two related challenges. Well, no, related. There's two relevant challenges around search. So first of all, is like lots of search tools started out using alphabets. So, you know, Roman alphabet like English uses, and things that are like alphabets. So Korean looks nothing like English when you read it, but it's got an alphabet. Japanese can have an alphabet. Chinese and most Japanese writing, yeah, it's ideographic. There's no alphabet. So if the tooling level, you know, there's a tooling level issue about, does it support how that locale is written? Does it assume that the language is written left to right? I mean, if we ever get a Tibetan team, we might have to think about some more challenges there. Tibetan has some interesting ways of being written. I can't think of any. Turkish is always a challenge for things like search, because case folding in Turkish is complicated. So there's like, how do languages work? And then there's geopolitics, which I remain amazed at the amount of geopolitics that contributing to Kubernetes covers. So regardless of what language you speak, where you are in the world determines whether you are behind state level censorship, but there's an overlap. You know,
Right.
Most of the people who are subject to state level censorship speak a small number of languages. So we need to account for both of those things, and we should be wary of conflating them completely. Like, you know, you might be in Taiwan speaking Chinese, essentially, you know, not worried about state level censorship. We want to serve that constituency as well, and not. We can't do a thing that says, okay, well, if you speak Chinese, we know what country you're in. That's not right. We don't.
Right, indeed. Yep. Thank you for that. I will include that in my research, because that's you're absolutely right. Conflating those two could be an easy thing to do, but yeah, that's exactly the type of thing that I'm hoping to avoid stepping in. I don't. That's exactly the type of mistake I want to avoid. So thank you for that.
Great. Nate, if you need any contacts in terms of a couple of the newer localizations that are spinning up that will have interesting use cases for tooling for alphabet left to right and that kind of thing, let us know, because we do have some folks who are still spinning up some work at the moment. I know like Ali Dewar, who's doing great stuff with the Arabic localization, for example, might be someone useful to chat to as well.
Perfect. Thank you.
No worries. Thank you for the update. I also chatted to Taylor Dolazal at KubeCon as well, who was also very thankful that we kind of jumped in and figured out how we're going to possibly either A, prioritize, and B, then work on search. So this is great. Thank you for the update. He let me know that you were it. So yeah, great.
Yeah, I'm looking. I think this is going to be a fun project. I'm looking forward to this one. So.
Awesome. One thing you mentioned about the next coming up meeting, looking at my own calendar for the next 2 weeks, you and I might be in the same place at a little event called Open Source Summit, North America. Yeah. So I wanted to let you know that if you are unable to be there, which it might be very likely, it's okay. You can kind of target the next one as well.
Well, in terms of my own availability, I'm taking time off the second half of April. So if it's not the 16th, I'm not going to be able to make the 30th. And I think the one after that is what, the 7th or the 14th. I may be able to make the 14th. So if it's not the next one, it's going to be like a month from now, and maybe a month and a half. So I'm going to try and get as much done as I can before wandering off. But a heads up, I'm wandering off.
No worries. Thank you. Thanks so much.
Yeah.
Great. Thank you. And thanks for the update. We are almost at the end of the agenda, but before we move on to open discussion with Kat's agenda item here, does anyone have any other issues or PRs that they wanted to bring up to chat about today? All right. I'm going to take that as a no. If it comes up later in your mind and when the meeting is over, feel free to bring it over to the SIG Docs channel. Great. Moving over to our open question and discussion area. Kat, I would love to hand over the stage to you.
Hello. So we just had our first ever docs freeze. And how do we feel that went? How can we improve it in the future? Did it actually make things easier for SIG docs? Did it actually make it easier for you to like plan availability for reviews? It's felt to me from inside of the release team that people did get their docs PRs into a mergeable state considerably earlier than they previously did. I'm surprised we only had one exception request, for instance, but you know, I'm inside of the release team, not reviewing for SIG docs, so I don't have the full picture. Any input or feedback on how we handled that and how we can do better next time would be greatly appreciated.
I have a thing of how we, as in SIG docs, can do better next time, which
Okay.
is to better time and align ourselves of the doc freeze as it happened the week after KubeCon. And so I think everyone was busy at an event, and we could, in SIG docs, we as leadership could have done a little bit better on the approver side to make sure that we had a capacity and so on. So that's definitely on us for next time. I think it just took us a little bit by surprise because we forgot this was coming, and then KubeCon came and sort of the freeze.
I think that likely won't continue to be as much of an issue. KubeCon was like a month and a half earlier this year than it usually is, and between that and me moving the final docs deadline earlier in the release cycle, like further away from the release day, meant that it landed in a weird spot. It was pretty much that, or land it in the middle of KubeCon week, which would have been worse, I think. So that's at least partially on me for where I put docs freeze, but it was that or move it so close to the actual release date that we couldn't justifiably threaten to pull an enhancement.
Right.
And I wanted to be able to threaten to pull an enhancement, you know?
Totally understand. Anyone else who wants to chime in of how they felt the docs freeze process was?
I think as the owner of theoretical owner helper of the only one that actually had to do an exception, having it just follow the same process that, you know, other exceptions in the release followed made it fairly easy. I don't think it was any kind of additional burden to have to do that process.
Yeah, I think it will be interesting to see in future cycles if filing those exceptions will fall on, or you know, it'll be interesting to see how the community feels when there's more exceptions that are out there and how they feel about filing that exception for documentation so late in the cycle when they have all their other ducks in a row. Yeah, it's going to be interesting considering that we've only had one case here, and that happened to be Xander who filed it, who is really familiar with SIG release exceptions. So, yeah. But on our end, it was really smooth, I would say. Like, it seemed to motivate people to move and have an action bias. So, yeah, I think that was really helpful.
Good.
I'm going to speak. I'm going to talk about how I see this playing out. So I'm thinking of prospect theory, actually, about how people, you know, decide what to do. And people don't like losing things. So people don't like losing their enhancements and thinking, oh, you know, all that code I've worked on, I don't want to lose it. So that's going to drive people to do minimum quality docs. And minimum quality changes with the stage you're at. So minimum quality for alpha is like nothing outright misleading, no style guide howlers, you you know, the feature is basically explained, and you know, like maybe like a couple of inbound links from the places people might look. You don't have to finish the docs for alpha. For beta, we'd like them to be release quality, you know, but if it's not, then you can still graduate to beta. And then for generally available, well, you know, we'd like the docs to be finished. To ship bad docs, you kind of have to get 3 exception requests, because, you know, if you had an alpha and your docs were on time, then you've got alpha quality docs, and then maybe for beta, you're like, okay, I didn't get my beta docs in time, but we've still got the alpha docs. It's not like we've got nothing. So that kind of gating is pretty good. And if someone does, you know, miss the docs freeze for a beta thing, we can give them an exception, say, look, yeah, fine, but before the next release, you need to, you know, staff this and work with SIG docs to get them finished. But I do think that the freeze gives us an opportunity to have that conversation with the SIG and saying, like, you know, you are going to staff this, right? You are going to staff this, right? And, you know, if something is still only beta quality when we ship it, you know, and we graduate it to stable, you know, that's fine. Like, you know, Kubernetes people aren't going to be deleting their clusters because that happened. So it's good to have the check, but it's also good to hand out the exceptions pretty liberally, just not 3 in a row.
Well, I don't foresee being like any more liberal with exception requests for late docs than we are with exception requests for late code. Like we do have standards for what documentation needs to look like, and if somebody files an exception request and asks for like, you know, 8 additional days, I am almost certainly going to say no to that no matter what it is, because that's a ridiculous length of time that close to the end of the release. But like in the case of Xander's, he initially asked for, I think, 5 days, and the blocker on the documentation was that the author was unavailable, the author was unresponsive. So we compromised on, we'll commit suggestions to this PR and call it 2 business days. And that seemed like an exceedingly reasonable compromise for me. I expect docs exception requests to be like much less contentious than code exception requests. Like it's down to what the blocker is for the documentation. If it's, I don't want to write it, then, well, you know, tough, we'll pull your cap. If it's the author is unavailable, cool, we'll commit suggestions to your PR. If it's waiting on SIG docs reviewers, we come talk to you and see how much time y'all have and how much time you need to get her done. I don't think we're going to be like handing them out like candy, but I also we're not going to be unreasonable about it. You know, like the docs are easier to get out the door quickly than the code is.
I also think you make a good point, Kat. Like the context of the exception is actually important. Like there might have been 3 exception requests filed, but 2 of those is because someone is on PTO unresponsive and they didn't know there was that deadline coming or something, versus actually no one wants to write docs, so they don't think they should be written, et cetera, et cetera. And that's like different behavior in a different conversation, right? So yeah, I agree that I think the context is super important. Yeah.
I think the sort of compromises that release docs makes also might depend on our capacity. So if there's a lot of exceptions, it might be a little more tricky to to take a hands-on approach like we did this time.
Yeah, that might be something we have to like look at over time, because I was anticipating several exception requests at docs freeze this time. Not just the one. So I guess we didn't really get a chance to stress test it, which is a blessing and a curse, right? Because we don't know what it looks like when there's a lot to do at docs freeze.
Yeah, it's actually kind of surprising with KubeCon. I definitely thought we were going to stress test it. So
yeah,
Tim, you something?
I think we did a good job. Like, you know, we release docs did a good job of communicating this, and like that might be the takeaway. Like, don't do you know, like even though this we over communicated perhaps because it was the first time, but keep up the over communication, and I think we won't need to just stress test it.
Yeah, they did a great job. And they were reminding on PRs and in Slack. And then it also got like 2 email blasts to dev. So it was pretty impossible to ignore. There was also a calendar reminder for it, just like there is for code freeze.
Yeah, big
Yeah.
plus one, Tim, on the comms part. That I think almost everyone knew that there's a docs freeze now. It's and I think that they will continue to know as well. Yeah.
Yeah, so as long as release docs continues to follow the handbook, which clearly laid out us to communicate in this way, I think we'll be good. One thing
Okay.
I did want to ask about though, Natalie, is if maybe in future cycles release docs can coordinate with SIG docs a little bit better, because I know you were mentioning that it was sort of hard to rally.
Oh yeah, and I think that hard to rally part on that on my end is general kind of SIG docs leadership end is all of us except for one lead were at KubeCon, and 3 of us of the 4 were involved in our SIG maintainer track talk, and so kind of and plus maybe separate talks and doing a lot of separate things, and so it definitely, I will openly say, fell off my radar a little bit, but because I'm in the release team, it was also still on my radar for this cycle. So like I think we in docs in SIG docs can be much better at making sure it's on our radar and that we're communicating earlier and often with release docs so that we're prepared. I will say, Kat, it's very helpful. For example, I know how the general exception request for code freeze works. And it's great to be tagged when like there's a docs freeze, for example, exception, and we need to kind of jump in. If that kind of thing is always happening, great, then I'm the kind of person that sees myself tagged and, you know, I'm distracted and have to answer the query. So I know that might not work for everyone, but I think that's still a great thing that is coming over from the general process that is working great for us too. So yes, Drew, plus one, we should coordinate a lot more with the release docs team.
Cool. Okay. Yeah. So I can make a note to myself to add something to the handbook that puts a little more emphasis on that. Yeah. The other thing I want to compliment, Kat, is just the escalations that we do on SIG release. I think it really helps. It really helps to monitor activity of SIG release, so that anyone on the SIG docs team that isn't contributing to balance the load, that we end up getting the coverage that we need. So I think that went really well this cycle as well.
Good. I'm glad that went well. It's not a pleasant thing to deal with, but when we have to deal with it, it's that's that it goes smoothly.
This is giving me all the feel-good vibes that everyone's talking so positively about this process. This is great. Just another huge like a round of applause generally to you, Kat. I know SIG docs, we just spent the last 3 releases complaining about how docs was being handled in the release, and you really were a torchbearer for us in our cause. So big thank you for doing so as part of the larger release team, and now also as a sub-project lead for the release team too.
Woo. I'm
Cool.
so thrilled to be able to help.
Before we dominate the conversation with a couple of us too much, does anyone have any other comments? Tim, you've got a hand raised.
I have a new topic. If we're like you know, we can hear more about the docs freeze thing, but I have a new topic.
Okay. Anyone want to give any more notes or comments around the docs freeze before we move on? All right, Tim. New topic. Go ahead.
Cool. So I want to do a bit of a shout out to Dipesh, who did that's gone in the wrong place. because of with typing, but a PR to add API references into pages. So I'll stick the link. Welcome back. Yeah, there's this nice new link in the right-hand navigation on the desktop view to like the API reference for a page. I stuck the deployment page link in the Zoom chat as an example. And I think it's fantastic. It's a really nice improvement. It's going to help people who are doing their CKADs go and find out how deployments work if they just winging it and looking at the documentation. It's just nice, and I'm really happy about it. Thank you, Dipesh.
Thanks, Dipesh. Oh, look, I even like, look at me. That's hilarious in how cameras work. Thanks, Dipesh. That's really awesome. Yeah, a big +1 to that, Tim. Dipesh is, for folks who don't know, Dipesh Rawat is a recently graduated from reviewer to approver in SIG docs. And he's been doing some really, really great work in not only reviewing a lot of things that are coming through, but actually trying to becoming for us one of our subject matter experts generally on the website, which is really, really great, and kind of plugging in a lot of his knowledge of like things that could be worthwhile to add, or reminding us when we are reviewing things that certain pages are auto-generated and so shouldn't be edited directly, those kinds of things. So Dipesh has been doing really well, and yeah, just a big +1 to that. Tim, could I suggest maybe a shout out like this might be really nice in the wider Kubernetes community if you wanted to put it in the shout outs channel over in the community Slack too.
Anyway, thanks, Dipesh.
All right, folks. Sorry about me fat fingering there to stop the recording and starting it again. Anyone else have any other topics or things they'd like to bring up before we close the meeting? Going once, going twice. Okay. I'm going to stop sharing my screen. I am going to stop the recording again, I guess, in a moment. Da, da, da.